there, this is Jeff Fritz, the Purple Blazer guy from Microsoft, letting you in on a little secret about my friend Carl Franklin. You know, the guy who started .NET Rocks, the first podcast about .NET way back in 2002. The guy who's been teaching Blazor on YouTube since 2020. Yeah, that Carl Franklin. Well, Carl has joined up with Code in a Castle to teach a week-long hands-on Blazor class this September. And get this, it's at a castle/villa in Tuscany. It's sort of a luxury vacation with Blazor learning built in. He's calling it the Blazor Master Class. You'll learn Blazor from the ground up, finishing the week with the ability to build and deploy Blazor applications. Now, Carl did this class last year, and it was a huge success. You can watch the awesome video from 2023 on the website, which I'll share in just a few seconds. Since the training happens for only 4 hours in the morning over 6 days, you can bring your significant other with you, and you should. This part of Italy is absolutely beautiful. There's so much to see and do. And Larry and Marco from Code in a Castle are organizing daily activities both at the castle and in the area. The castle is in the Maremma, a less touristy region of Tuscany, offering both classic Tuscan hill country as well as easy access to the Etruscan Riviera with sublime local food, wine, and olive oil around every corner. Breakfast is included every day. There will be 2 communal dinners at the castle bookending the experience, and most other meals and all activities are included. And did I mention you'll learn Blazor in person from Carl Franklin? Space is limited, and for good reason. This is a quality training experience in a beautiful setting. Go to codeinacastle.com/Blazor2024. That's BLAZOR 2024 to take advantage of this amazing opportunity to join Carl in Tuscany for an unforgettable week of La Dolce Vita while advancing your programming skills in this important new technology.
Hey, Carl and Richard here with your 2024 NDC schedule.
We'll be at as many NDC conferences as possible this year, and you should consider attending no matter what. The Copenhagen Developers Festival happens August 26th through the 30th. Tickets at cphdevfest.com.
NDC Porto is happening October 14th through the 18th. The early bird discount ends June 14th. Tickets at ndcporto.com.
We'll see you there. We hope. Hello and welcome back to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
We're here again for the 1906th time.
There you go. Well, let's be clear. I'm the new guy. I didn't become co-host till show 100.
Okay. You're 1806 shows.
You'd had 2 co-hosts before that. I remember thinking to myself, it's 50 shows. What's the big deal? It's going to be easy. 50 shows.
What's the matter with us anyway?
I just got back from 26 days on the road, man.
Wow.
Which is not actually a good idea. That was too long.
Wow.
It's a long time. 6 stops total. 3 Yeah, you can't complain. Get a chance to meet the folks who listen to the show and talk to all our friends and that are, the other speakers and things. And I got to visit with our friend Remy.
How was Remy?
Netherlands.
Remy Karan from the Netherlands.
That's right. He's got a little baby. He's got a little 7-month-old.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And I did some fishing with our friend Huckabee.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Things. Yeah.
Was that in Montana?
It was in Montana. That was on the Dolan Flats, west of Missoula.
Was Brad Pitt with you guys?
No.
No?
Robert Redford, absolutely, but no Brad Pitt. The guys who run that place are fantastic. And it is, I find fly fishing vaguely daft because, we're throwing everything back. We're catching a lot of fish, but we're putting them all back.
It's an excuse to stand in the water and drink beer.
Yeah, let's be clear. Actually, it is drinking and partying with your friends, interrupted occasionally by floating in a boat. But we had a great time, and my cast is getting better according to the outfitter. So,
that sounds great.
There you go.
Well, I don't really have much to say after that, so let's just roll the music for Better Know a Framework.
All right, dude. What do you got?
So at Build, I did this video with Don Webier from Dev Express.
Oh, yeah.
And it's called May the Forms Be With You.
Oh, I love it. You're such a geek.
I didn't name it. I can't take credit for that. I think that was Don. But basically, it's a WinForms hybrid app that uses both WinForms and Blazor at the same time.
And you're saying WinForms, not web forms.
WinForms.
You're crazy.
I know.
This is really cool.
It's a Windows Form app. It has like a Windows Forms Dev Express grid, and then it has some other stuff that's built with Blazor, and they interact with each other, and it's very cool.
Okay.
So I thought I would post that. And since this is 1906, you can go to 1906.pwop.me, and that'll take you there. Or you could just Google Bing, May the Forms Be With You, Microsoft Build. Yeah.
Awesome, dude.
So that's what I got, Richard. Who's talking to us?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1755, the one we did with one Joseph Finney, talking about building text grab. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's in the Power Toys. And it turns out if you make a Power Toy, they'll make an MVP.
Yeah.
And Talon Kincaid had this comment. It's a few months ago now. He said, text grab revolutionized online classes for me. Professor's notes and the ability to make notes through OCR. I appreciate this developer's problem solved over a Christmas break. Thanks, Finn. That's Talon Kincaid.
Very cool.
I got nothing more to say than that. It's like, I hope Joe feels the same way. It's like you make something, people use it, and they're grateful. Like, this is the best part of our job, truly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is, especially with small little purpose-built utilities like that.
Yeah. So, Talon, thank you so much for your comment. And a copy of Music Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music Code By.
And you can follow us on X Twitter, which is what I'm calling it now.
Twitter X?
No, X Twitter. It was Twitter. Now it's
Twitter. Now it's not Twitter anymore.
It's X Twitter. You can follow us there at Carl Franklin and at Rich Campbell. However, the cool kids are hanging out on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
Send us a toot. You never know. How about that for a tagline? Send us a toot. You never know. It's like all you need is $1 and a dream. All right. Well, let's introduce formally Joe Finney. By day, he's a mobile product owner and MVP and builds productivity apps for Windows at night. And when he's not programming, he's birding, running, and enjoying tasty coffee and beer in Milwaukee. Hey, Joe.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Great to have you back, man.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good to be back and talk about really surprising but exciting stuff.
Oh, you pinged me on this show, and I just said yes. Where do you want to go, friend? What are you talking about?
So the big build news, I think, for a lot of Windows developers was that WPF is back.
Did it ever really go away?
WPF is officially back. How's that? Yeah, it's I think this is one of those announcements, to your point, Richard, that everyone was happy to see more of an acknowledgement.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it never went away.
No. But it felt like the spend was just like housekeeping. They were keeping it patched for security, but you weren't seeing features.
And the another hot topic of this show is frequently open source, and how do you manage that? How do you support it? And WPF was open sourced years ago, and so that was. I mean, I don't know when that actually happened, but it's been open source for several years.
Yeah.
But if you look at the contributions and like how it's actually being managed, it's not like a traditional open source, repository.
Before we go any further with WPF, I got to acknowledge the couple of people who left comments on the website about our talk with Beth Massey. And, here's Carl dissing XAML again, right? Because, I'm kind of cranky sometimes. But not really. The thing is that I did a lot of XAML. And then then the web sort of took over my life, and I learned Blazor. And I just love the binding model and all that stuff. And when I could do WPF applications, I chose to do them in Blazor with Blazor Hybrid. And like I was talking in the beginning, the web forms in Blazor is also a nice combination. So, yeah, and you know, it's my opinion. I'm kind of entitled to my opinion. Everybody's got an opinion. You know, this isn't a training session on XAML. You know, this isn't .NET Rocks. It's just we just talk. You know, So there's plenty of people who love XAML. Billy Hollis comes to mind. He and I are really good friends, and he even likes Blazor too. So, you know, it's not that I'm down on XAML. It's just that I personally am doing more Blazor than XAML these days.
Blazor makes you happy.
Blazor makes me happy, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. But I'm really curious to find out because I didn't read about this and I didn't see anything about it at Build because I wasn't really watching. But so tell us what's new in WPF that's so exciting.
Well, I really do think, as Richard said, the attention is hopefully changing. I think that's kind of the major element that's been a big problem for a lot of people for a long time, which was you have these major projects, you have these huge apps that people are building, and Microsoft was telling everyone to, you know, first they were saying, oh, stop building that and build UWP.
Yeah.
And obviously that was a bit too far for most people to do, and it didn't work, and it cut out a bunch of stuff and was a whole new flavor of XAML, and the whole model was totally different, you know, focus on mobile devices. And so people did not jump. People stayed in WPF. And then they said, okay, WinUI, you know, Project Reunion, WinUI, and now the WinApp SDK, that's the new thing. And for a couple of years, they were like, this is our platform. This is the only thing we're supporting. Again, they open sourced WPF and WinForms years ago.
2018 was when they open sourced WPF.
Okay. So it's been open source for a while. But I would say mainly it's there to track issues. There have been some major community contributions, but major in the, you know, it's amazing that they did it and they were kind of big, but they were not fixing some of the major kind of pain points that you would have if you were going to make a new WPF app today, which as Spaceship or Battleship Gray, when you make a new WPF app today, it looks like a WPF app. And so I would say that was the number one, you know, one of the major challenges that a lot of people had with the platform, which is it does a lot of stuff that it's really the only or the best way to do it. It's the main tool that most people are using to make these really complicated Windows apps.
Yeah.
Microsoft's not investing in it. They're not focusing on it. And it's a lot of work to try to get it to look like it fits in Windows, in Windows 11. And so that was actually recently they announced that the theming is all changing. So you can add a new line to your application XAML file to use a new Fluent design resource. And boom, you have all the rounded corners, all the fluenty things. And so your old school WPF app now looks like it belongs in a part of Windows, which was always a big challenge of how do you make this old framework look and behave new. And so there were a lot of independent kind of open source frameworks to do that work, but they were very open source. They were maintained by community members, and it's a lot of work. There are a lot of controls. And so now Microsoft has acknowledged, okay, we have two major platforms if you're going to build Windows apps, WPF and WinApp SDK. So they've kind of acknowledged the reality that those are the two platforms.
But they didn't say WinUI.
Well, WinUI is the UI layer of WinApp SDK.
Right.
So I would say it's under that tent. So WinApp SDK is definitely, it's the APIs, the platform, and then WinUI is the UI for it.
Aren't we talking about a more essential schism here, Joe? Because WinUI and the WinApp SDK comes from the Windows team, and WPF comes from DevDiv.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, this is a Conway's Law situation.
Yeah, absolutely. You have two different teams that are writing UIs that are creating a user interface to a platform. You're going to get two.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is definitely a challenge. And I think it's when you look at the priorities of the Windows team, which is like moving forward and doing more new modern things with devices and everything they're doing with ARM and performance there, if you want to do those kinds of cool things, that's all WinApp SDK. So there were a lot of announcements at WinApp, around WinApp SDK at Build about what you can do. And now you can do ahead of time compile. Now you can do a bunch of like really cool stuff. And there's a lot of new controls, and it's way more modern as far as like if you want to touch the device and pinch and zoom those things. WinApp SDK, that's out of the box. That's really easy. You don't have to worry about it.
Right.
The WinUI controls are amazing. They feel modern. They look modern. WPF is classic. It's the classic flavor. So if you're doing a lot of keyboard and mouse, it's right there with you. And that's kind of what it's tailored to, and that's what it's been tailored to, and that's what a lot of these huge apps that, you know, big companies all over the place that really, I mean, sure, there are elements of, well, isn't Visual Studio WPF?
It is, but
I
it's
think it is now,
unusual exception, right? That was a very specific intent by Jason Zander in 2010 to put WPF to work inside a Microsoft application for the first time ever. And it cost Studio, if anybody remembers Studio 2010, like it was delayed by a month for performance reasons. On the other hand, WPF got wildly better because they needed it to. Right? They pounded on it for performance. They pounded on the COM interop. Like there was all those problems. And again, I'm going back 14 years because I get to do that. But I really feared for WPF back in those days. It had been 4 years since they launched it in 2006 as a fallout of Vista. And it should have been implemented in Office immediately. But because that's your best validation, you know, if you're a smart Microsoft watcher, you look at what Microsoft is using because that's the products that are going to persist. For crying out loud, the VB6 runtime is still shipped in Windows 11.
I'll tell you, there's a WPF app, a commercial app that I use a lot for streaming that's written in WPF. Yeah. And it's called vMix.
Nice.
vMix is written in, get this, VBNet.
Wow.
In WPF.
Wow.
And
it's all IL on the hood, baby.
It's
Doesn't
a
matter.
app. Like it really is awesome.
It's great.
Yeah. I think that's kind of, I mean, if we go all the way back to the beginning of this discussion about a utility that does a job, I think that's kind of, at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. Like software, not for software's sake. We're here to build tools. And WPF has been around for a long time, which means when you run into a problem with WPF and you Google it,
there's an answer.
Yeah, for sure. And it is very useful.
Let's get to 2024 here. We're going to ask ChatGPT, really, aren't we?
That's funny that you say that. You want to go very modern? So, one, it's really funny whenever GitHub Copilot suggests APIs that you want to call, and you see it in a little preview in the gray text, and you're like, oh, that's exactly what I want. You hit tab, and then the red squigglies come, and they say, that's not a real API. That's what you want.
Exactly what you want in your dreams.
Yeah. So then you search it in GitHub, and you say, is this actually real? Why did this get recommended? And you're like, oh, no, it's something that somebody else made.
I made it up to make you happy.
It sounds
I went around with ChatGPT recently, trying to solve a problem, and it became clear after about, 20 or 30 minutes that it really didn't have the necessary means to solve the problem. And just a quick search on Stack Overflow, I found the answer immediately. So, I am surprised
I'm surprised that the data is not better, because there's a lot of WPF questions and answers on Stack Overflow, and they're really high quality, and they're really good, and they ask basic questions that you're going to run into if you're developing an app. And if you ask the same thing in WinApp SDK, you're lucky if you get an answer. I mean, for example, I make an app that basically generates icon files because I needed to make icon files for my other apps. And I couldn't find an easy way to do it. And so what I wanted to be able to zoom in and see the pixel perfect preview of that with no anti-aliasing, no blurring, no smoothing.
Yeah. And don't mess with my picture. Leave it alone.
Right. I know it's 16 by 16 pixels. Show me the sharp lines.
You can see those in Visual Studio, I think.
Yep. Yeah, you can in Visual Studio. That is, but if you it's a little weird. Visual Studio Previewer for images can be a little funky. But WinApp SDK, when you zoom in, I was like, I just want to turn off this thing. And all the solutions I found were WPF. Because there are a lot of solutions out there. But a lot of them are WPF because it's been around. It's it's battle tested. And
well,
so
it's
if
also
you
been abstracted from the platform the whole time, right? Like there's no direct platform dependencies. I mean, let's be clear here. WinApp SDK is what the Windows teams use to build parts of Windows. It's C++ first and foremost. It supports .NET, C# et al. But does it? Like, I could see where there'd be, what their first language is. Their first language is C++.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you look at a call inside of WinUI and go, if I was a C++ person, that would be awesome. But I'm a C# person and, how am I going to do this?
Well, exactly. And the brand new, again, build announcement, I think it was Copilot Runtime. Is that the name of it? Which is all the models that they're going to bring, the different ML models to WinApp SDK.
Right.
I was looking at these saying, you know what? I have an app called TextGrab that would love to have some really updated OCR capabilities. And they're like, here's how you implement it in C++. And I'm like, can I?
This happened in the early days of .NET with C# and VB.NET. The first samples were always written in C#, right? And the VB.NET people were understandably annoyed. It's like, come on.
Made me switch.
Yeah. Well, my problem was that I was so used to writing VB that I kept forgetting it was VB.NET. But when I was writing C#, you knew you were writing C#.
You really did know, yeah.
So your brain made the context switch. But, you hit on it. It's a C++ first API. As much as and I appreciate them doing this, trying to make it friendly for .NET folks, that's not its native language.
I think of these two platforms, though, as serving different customers. I think of Adobe, using the WinApp API for their applications, because they're all C++, maximum performance kind of things. Whereas business software, and software that we're writing for ourselves, you don't want to have to do all that. You need to be productive, and that's where WPF really shines.
Absolutely. And WPF is great for forms over data. It has a visual designer. It has a huge toolbox of controls. It has a huge supported ecosystem of companies who build controls, who offer contracts, and people who know how the system works and can jump in and fix it. And they know the common pitfalls.
I'm sorry, did you just casually say visual designer? Is that design? I mean, if you're a WinForms person, like I came to appreciate that the WinForms designer was the exception. That every other attempted designer couldn't hold a candle to what WinForms did.
That's true, but WPF has a visual designer. And the number one request of WinApp SDK and WinUI is a visual designer.
Yeah,
and
let me see what's going on.
The team has not built it yet.
That's because it's not easy. Look at how long it took the WPF team to make one that's usable. Like it's hard.
It seems like we have this conversation, Richard, every once a year or 2 years or so, and you bring up the same point, and I come back with the same comeback, which is Windows Forms is pixel based.
Yep.
And designers are easy when it's pixel based, but not the UI isn't flexible like it is in XAML. And so that just by nature, you don't have, have you ever seen a web designer that was close to Windows Forms? No, because it's not pixel based either.
Well, and I point out that WinForms isn't pixel based anymore either since 3.1 SDK. Now they're doing interpolation for high resolution, which is why it wasn't pixel perfect to switch over to it. But, point well taken. And let's face it, I rarely want to manipulate the designer. I want that continuous view as I'm editing code.
What I mean by pixel based, Richard, is if you put a button, you have a location which is pixel based. Whether it gets scaled is a different thing, but you start with a grid, and you have the X and Y are 100 and 100. That's where it is on the page.
It's a bit more.
The whole thing might scale and move around depending on the flow layout or whatever. But
it's interesting how the tools are adapting, even design tools. I mean, stuff like Figma. I don't know how familiar.
Oh yeah,
where?
Yeah,
I got bit by Figma.
Yeah, Figma is a really interesting, cool
tool. It is
tool.
tempting, isn't it?
And where's a lot of the energy and where's a lot of the cool stuff built is in like auto layout, which is not pixel perfect. Those controls float and they resize and they fill the space in weird dynamic ways, and it's hard to do. But it's also interesting because WPF with their visual designer, I think initially you might think, I'm going to be looking at the whole app with all of your child components and all of this stuff. And you're like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff to visually display. But really what I find the visual designer handy for is I want to look at a small little component because, I'm building a little button or I'm building a little screen page.
Right.
And I just want to see my little component as I'm updating it. And maybe I forget to put some property on there and it's all the way to the side and not, whatever it is. I want to be able to design these little components, and then you bring all the components together, you run the app, and you see how it flows and you see how it, works as a running app. But I think that's kind of where it is really convenient.
Yeah. And to that point, it's like we're also no longer in the land of everybody has a desktop PC. You're expected to make this stuff look good on a tablet and on a phone and everywhere else. And these new design tools are way more capable of that. It's nothing certain, of course, but, capable.
Right. And WinUI has, I think UWP introduced it, UWP XAML, but there's like these view states where you can have breakpoints, which it's so nice when you have a window that you can shrink down and the UI kind of adapts and compacts so that you can have a little column and your navigation view changes or your UI moves around so that you can still hit the buttons. And some of these old school WPF apps, you resize that window.
Yeah.
You can't use the app anymore.
You are sad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like,
buttons are gone.
Right. You're like, well, I guess I'm not allowed to have it like that. And so I think that's kind of the thinking here is if you want to build more of a modern dynamic app, there are tools for you. Yeah. But if you are supporting an old WPF app or a very purpose-built utility, WPF is here. And Microsoft is doing some big investments to make it better.
I'm looking at the contributors for the past few months on the GitHub repository, and the Maestro bot has been pushing code constantly. So it just again the proof's in the pudding. It's like there's no better example than there is new code going into WPF right now.
Yep. Yeah, I think the two big announcements that came out of Build was the Windows 11 styling, and hyphen-based ligature support. So get excited.
Hyphen-based what?
Ligatures.
I'm sorry, I can't even speak. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Honestly, it's not a feature I use. Richard?
I don't even know what it means. Sorry, I'm going to have to. That's something I can Google Bing after the show.
It's just it's the way that fonts lay out on the page based on hyphen, so yeah.
But it's been an open issue since 2018. It was opened right away.
Yep.
So that's getting fixed.
Yeah, no, So this is about the features of this is a C++ approach to coding, right? So it's how do you pass these things? All right. I mean, it's that now that we talk about it this way, I realize, hey, this is all the same problem from working on it from different teams. Think about the origins of UWP was Microsoft was supposed to have a phone and a tablet and a PC, and they wanted to make it easy for us to code for all of them. And the Windows team tried to drive that. That's the original concept of UWP, and it spun up to become the WinApp SDK. And the same issue existed from Xamarin and from XAML and from Silverlight. Like XAML was very fragmented for a long time there until the last few years where they've kind of brought all the XAMLs back together because they were in a state. But we were all struggling with the same essential problem, which is that the age of the client machine is the same as the dev machine. Has been dead for a long time.
Did they really bring all the XAMLs back together?
For the most
Was I
part,
sleeping through that?
Well, that's essentially, if you think about what is Maui, that's Maui. Right?
No, it's just another flavor of XAML.
I would agree.
But it's it's supposed to be the dominant flavor now.
It's supposed to be, but not. I don't think.
I'm with you. It's definitely, that was the mission. There's a few others that have gone away in the process.
I kind of think that's the way with everything, though. With WinUI, UWP was supposed to be the one XAML to rule them all. Yep. I mean, but they have this thing called backward compatibility that they can't break.
No.
So these XAMLs are going to last forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really are. And I think ultimately when you see Microsoft do these big jumps and turn around and look at their developers and say, all right, follow me to UWP. And I think they have Microsoft, their biggest problem is that all of their developers and the people working with them are really, really smart.
Yeah.
So they don't always follow directions.
No.
And they think, let me do the math. Let me see where that works for me and my business and my apps. They're not just going to jump. They're too smart for that. And also they've been bit in the past. So you have all these developers who look at the, UWP and they say, okay, what's my trade-off? I spend a bunch of time investing in this. What do I get? And the answer wasn't super clear.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, you get a different app that's touch-friendly for devices that are not, super broad.
Not touch?
Yeah, it's not touch. But when you look at Maui, you say, oh, you can use your language, your platform that and you can push it on iPhones. I think people go, okay, yep, I see the trade-off. I will learn a new flavor of XAML because getting your .NET app on an iPhone is a big deal. Yeah, that's a big deal, and it's really hard to do. And I'm not going to learn HTML. Sorry, Carl. I'm not doing CSS.
No, that's fine. And I'll reciprocate. I think that once you learn XAML of any type, doing the other flavors of XAML isn't that big a deal. They're just keywords,
Right.
Once you know I don't know really I know the binding syntax in WPF is really sophisticated. I'm not so sure it's as sophisticated in the other flavors of XAML, but I wouldn't know.
Yeah, it is actually really sophisticated, and some of the things that make the binding in WinApp SDK that in some of my apps that I've made that's really, really nice is a little tool that Microsoft builds in the community toolkit called MVVM Toolkit, I think it is.
Yeah.
And that makes it really easy to do like property change. And you just add that little attribute to the top of your properties and it source generates all of the code for you. And so that makes binding and updating and keeping everything in sync and binding it to the view model super easy. Like it's not even a problem anymore. Everything is up to date. Everything is fast and quick. Yeah, that's an amazing tool.
It is.
No, and important. Like, yeah, you're seeing a way forward here. It's just nothing is simple.
It's been a while since I used the MVVM toolkit, but if there was one of these things that required you to your models to inherit from a base class. Maybe it was the view model that inherits from a base class, but I really don't like having to inherit base classes in models. I can't remember which one that was though.
Yeah, I'd have to pull up my repo to check.
I don't know.
I don't know if you have to make it a struct or what, but it's really nice to be able to drop that attribute on things and just say, okay,
I agree.
Can you handle this complexity for me? I'm focused on solving a business need right now.
Yeah.
Right. Which turns out to be always the truth.
Yeah. Hey guys, hold that thought for just this moment for these very important messages. We'll be right back. Hey, Carl here. Tired of the debugging grind? Let's talk about a breakthrough that's here to help. Raygun's AI error resolution isn't just another tool. It's like having a seasoned developer right by your side, suggesting fixes and explaining errors in real time. If you're curious as to how it can smooth out your debugging day, visit raygun.com/.netrocks. That's Raygun, RAYGUN.com/DOTNETROCKS for your free 14-day trial to explore the way Raygun is revolutionizing debugging. You know, it's common for a business application to contain 15% repetitive code just because of metaprogramming limitations in the C# language. Why write boilerplate manually when a machine could generate it for you? Enter Metalama, the code generation and verification toolkit for C#. Their C# to C# template language is simply amazing. Logging, caching, memento, observable. If it's repetitive, Metalama can automate it. Visit metalama.net today and learn to automate your code patterns with their free edition. Remember, it's Metalama with one L. METALAMA.net. And we're back. I'm Carl Franklin. That's Richard Campbell.
Hey.
And that's Joe Finney, and we're talking WPF. It's getting a facelift or an update or an upgrade or something.
It is.
Getting some care and feeding.
Getting some care and feeding, care and attention.
Definitely a facelift if you want it. So if you're a WPF developer and you want your WPF app to look like Windows 11, then you can add in a little resource dictionary to your app, and then boom, you got all that UI for you.
I'm going to sound like an old man here, but is there a tool to make Windows 11 look like Windows 10?
Nice.
That would be cool.
It's called running Windows 10.
Yeah. I'm sure there's somebody who sells something out there that does that.
Frank, can I just complain a minute here? When you right-click on a file and you expect, like a zip file, for example, you expect properties and, undo this, what am I trying to say?
Unzip?
Yeah, not unzip, but you want properties. You have to go to more properties to get the things that you want. Like, they're trying to hide things from you.
Yeah, it's
this taskbar settings. Why do I have to do 3 extra clicks now to hide my taskbar?
and unhide it? No, it's definitely a challenge. And to Richard's point earlier about how fast WPF grew up whenever Visual Studio started taking it and using that, I think the same thing is happening with WinApp SDK, because the file explorer in Windows 11 is built in WinApp SDK, I believe.
Unblock was the word I was looking for. Sorry.
Unblock. Okay. Yeah. And it is definitely, there's a lot of attention on the file explorer in Windows 11 and the right click menu and how performant things are and what it can do and how it's different from Windows 10. And I think the team is getting a lot of feedback, and a lot of the challenges that they had with performance were WinApp SDK challenges, because it's so low level. It needs to be super performant. And so hopefully in .NET 9 with AOT and all of those fancy things, hopefully they are listening and building and responding. But it's hard whenever you have such an ingrained user base who really knows how to get things done, and then you move their cheese under a show more button.
Does this imply that the WinApp SDK that is the low-level library to Windows and that WPF will sit over top of that and just give you access to all those capabilities?
I don't necessarily think so. I think WPF is not, I don't think the role that it's serving is going to change. I think it's still going to sit in its own little, like this, you build apps in these vertical stacks. Yep. You can already today, I think they like giving your WPF a package identity. You can kind of wrap it in a package, and then you can access those WinRT APIs. So you can do that today. You've actually been able to do that for a while now. And that's kind of where they're investing. That's where the team is investing a lot of those interesting models and doing some of that weird stuff. And so you can do all that.
Well, I mean, they're talking about servicing the Win 11 controls. And look, that to me sounds like you're just putting access to the API into WPF.
I think it's styling. I don't think that they are
styling.
Yeah. I think that they're bringing just the look and feel. I don't think that there's any sort of OS level injection into WPF.
I mean, you just described how the file menu in File Explorer in Windows 11 is different because it's built against the WinApp SDK. So, the fact that if I could do that in WPF now, that would mean, okay, I have access to WinApp SDK without using it directly.
No, I do think that WPF new UI is mainly just UI. So actually the announcement came in like 2 steps. So before build, I think in like February maybe, Microsoft announced that the open source library WPFUI
was collaborating with Win 11.
Was collaborating with the team, and Microsoft is going to make this the UI of WPF officially.
Yeah, that was December of 23.
Okay, it was December.
Well ahead of build, but
So that's where they announced, hey, look, we're going to use this because there were a couple out there. I think there was Modern.
Modern WPF. Yeah. Like you speaking to the same problem that the WPF apps are looking dated.
Right. And so this developer made a really popular repository. It was being used by the PowerToys team for a couple of their utilities and actually contributing back. And I think really gauging the health and the vitality of that project. And then Microsoft announced, hey, we're going to partner with them. And then in build, they showed off the WPF Gallery Preview app and how easy it is to basically add one line to your app XAML, and boom, your app looks like it's Windows 11.
Yeah.
But I do believe that that's a big distinction. It looks like it.
Right.
It is not WinUI 3.
Okay.
It looks like WinUI 3. It is not WinUI 3 from what I understand. I
think that's an important distinction too, because that is, again, a theming thing versus a functionality thing.
Yes. Yeah. And stuff like AOT, like compiling your app ahead of time, all of that great stuff, WinApp SDK. Right. So right now, there's no trimming, there's no, all of that stuff does not exist in WPF. It's just the way that it's built. Trimming support, I think, is not trim compatible. It's a very popular, well-requested feature in WPF, and the team has not announced that they are going to make it trim compatible. And so when you make a self-contained WPF app, it holds the whole framework with it. It's big. It's, it's all there, which is good, but also that's just what you expect when you want to take a dependency on WPF. That's how it is.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting. And I'm stunned to see that PowerToys was kind of at the center of all of this, right? That in a lot of ways, I'm looking at the various messages and stuff, and they always reference PowerToys, like the folks you work with and you contributed to were exemplars of ways to modernize WPF apps into Win 11.
Right. Yeah.
To the point where they've actually adopting it.
Yeah. This is how do you actually do Agile at a company like Microsoft with a product like Windows?
Right.
Like, how do you do that without, how do you make these smaller bets and experiment with these different platforms? And I think the way you do it is you experiment where you can. And PowerToys was very much a heavily feedbacked tool. Like, if you do something
deeply
a little
connected to the Windows team,
very deeply connected to the Windows team, but also to the community. So the open source community is vibrant. There are over 5,000 issues open, and I don't even know. I don't even want to know how many have been closed. And so it's a very popular repository. So it is kind of the tip of the spear for what are we doing? How can we unblock developers? How can we make people more productive? And so with a utility like Text Extractor in PowerToys, the only way to do a big full screen overlay with transparent windows, that was WPF.
Because you would have thought it would have been WinApp SDK.
You maybe would think that, but nope.
Nope, it was WPF.
Is there anything, Joe, in the new WPF that you think they got wrong?
No, I don't think so right now. I think they're taking a very cautious approach. I mean, I think it's...
Anything you don't like?
Not yet. I mean, again, it's still in preview, so I think I want to see some of the interactivity stuff come forward, like being able to pinch and zoom and interact with it in a much, if you have a scroll viewer and you could just flick it with your finger on your Surface laptop or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, that's really nice. And it doesn't seem like that is really on the roadmap today. So it really is a look and feel. So that is kind of the trickiness there, where you can have two apps that maybe look very similar, but under their hood use two very different technologies and end up behaving differently from a user standpoint. So part of me thinks, well, it's great, they look the same, but also in the same way that USB-C can be challenging because it communicates universal form factor, but it is not universal. It's just
depends
a
on
shape.
the device on each end and the cable. All three have a say.
right. Which
is at least two too many.
Yeah. So that's kind of my only hesitation is, okay, you've done this.
Yeah.
And now
but Flick doesn't work. Right?
Yeah. And these little things.
These two apps look the same, and one flicks and one doesn't.
And you say, well, why is that? And they go, well, how much time do you have? Sit down.
Right.
Here we go.
Yeah.
It's a nuanced answer.
I'm going to bring in Windows Vista. So back in
the day.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to a roadmap then too. It's like, what they could do? Implement Flick.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's kind of again, how do you implement something like this at such a big old product? You don't just say you have to use it. So if you make a new WPF app today, it's going to look, it's got that Battleship gray. It's not going to look any different. You have to opt in. So I think you're still going to see a lot of people who do not use the new UI and a lot of apps that, even though this is there, people are not going to use it. They're not going to opt into it. So mainly, I would say I would be interested to see how big of an effect this has going forward, because how many new WPF apps are being created.
Right.
I'm not sure. But
yeah,
they demonstrated a conversion of an existing app. I think they went back to the old picture viewer sample that was built way back in the day, and they added one line and said, hey, look, theming support, light mode, dark mode support, stuff like that. So hopefully developers are updating their apps.
Yeah, I'd be more interested in, I've been using Modern WPF, and it's starting to get a little stale now. How do I roll out Modern WPF and roll in this new capability and add your magic line?
Hey, speaking of upgrades, I got to take a minute here and thank my buddy Richard, because I have this old ATX case that had a power supply from the Clinton administration. and it was so noisy. I was using it as an Unraid server. And I was like, Richard, this thing is so loud and I have to put it in the studio. Do you know, find me a quiet ATX power supply. He's like, this is what you want.
I think I was in an airport too, literally walking, and just went, wait a sec.
It is so quiet. I can't even hear it.
Yeah.
It's so nice. It's a thermal take.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was going to say, you got to say who it is.
Yeah. Good, proper and I think we deliberately oversized it so the fan never even spun up.
Yeah.
Nice.
You're burning about 500 watts, put in the 800 watt, the fan will never even turn on.
Yeah. So now I have a 50 terabyte RAID server.
Nice.
That you can't even hear.
Nice.
Expect the hard drives to be the loudest thing in it.
Yeah, I know. That's right. I was actually sitting having dinner. And I'm like, what is that thumping? Do you hear that? Kelly's like, that's your computer, you idiot.
That's although all those arms start stroking at the same time, you're going to generate some noise.
Yeah. Copying files. Well, anyway, it's about making things old, new, and that's what we're doing, whether it's hardware or software. Everybody's got to do that at some point with their software.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I feel like we box this problem. The problem here is that you always want to use the code that people are using. And so on the surface level, you say, oh, well, WinApp SDK is the way to go. There's lots of people using it, but they're all Microsoft people in C++. I don't know how many C# people are using it in production apps. Well,
Joe raised his hand.
Yeah, Joe being the strange alien.
Yeah, I've got a few out there.
It's not just text grab.
Nope. Yeah. So WinApp SDK is what I use for a simple icon file maker, for a simple QR code maker, for a few little Windows utility apps that I build because I was like, I don't like randomly Googling a website and trying to find a QR code. That seems a little sketchy.
That's a little sketchy.
And I was like, I will use this as an opportunity to learn MVVM Toolkit and WinApp SDK. Yeah. And here we go. Here's a little free utility for the community. But to your point about you want to use the tool that other people are using. You want to use the frameworks and the languages that are healthy and supported. I know Microsoft is late to the big open source game and is kind of a unique position. The community isn't typically very open, but you'll see this with like Modern WPF and WPFUI, where you have these community supported UI frameworks to support WPF. Yeah. And so part of the interesting thing is Microsoft had abandoned it, and it was so popular that the open source community stepped up and made these awesome tools with all these awesome controls to really, help developers stay being productive. Right. And now
Microsoft's come back to it because of that.
They have come back. They have identified, hey, there's an audience here. And then they picked a winner. So this is where open source gets weird, because now if you were building a moderately popular WPF UI framework, what do you do? How do you manage that transition? And I think that's, to your point, Richard, about I have an app that's using one of those frameworks. How do I drop the dependency and use the new Microsoft one? I think that's...
Yeah, you hit it. On one hand, you've got Kanara, the guy who created Modern WPF. But you can make nice with him. And in some way, I think about when Ron Eisenberg hung up Durandal, as he said, Angular's a better way to go. He changed his mind later, but that's a separate issue. And so Kanara could say much the same thing. It's like, hey, because you can also see that he was struggling to keep up. And I'm presuming it's a he. I hate that I did that. But there were a lot of demands on that to try and keep all the features in there. So, and Microsoft picking a winner just by putting FTEs on it.
Yeah.
The rest of us are all volunteers contributing to open source once in a while. And Microsoft goes, here's 4 40-hour-a-week people to contribute to this library. Watch the PRs flow.
Yeah. And watch the preview NuGet packages pop in every single week, a new preview. Yep. And you're like, wow, the rate of this really sped up. But I think it's an interesting example there where I don't know what the model is, what is the transitionary period there, because like people get into .NET to make money, to make tools for companies and businesses to do things. It's not usually just random, fun, goofy stuff.
No. Right.
And this is the point where if you're building these frameworks and you're doing it for a couple of years, you probably have a lot of users and there's a lot of dependencies there. So whose responsibility is that? And it's tricky now that Microsoft has picked a winner of, okay, we're going to do our new stuff. Don't use those third-party UIs is kind of what they're signaling. Use ours. And then if you're over there, you're like, well, am I on an island? Who builds the bridge away?
Is there a bridge?
And who pays to build a bridge? Do you just say, okay, we're gonna build migrations from the top 3 most popular and help those?
I hope they would do that. The more likely, it's also very reasonable as a lead dev who committed to WPFUI or to modern WPF to have to stand up in a scrum one day and go, guys, we have to add this to the sprint. We have to switch. All this code has to change. Or we're going to be in real trouble. We can't keep adding more code dependent on this library that probably won't get a lot of love anymore when all the action's over here. And that's a tough meeting because that is bumping out a set of features. Largely, if you do it right, nobody will be able to tell. You won't even be able to see a change.
Right.
But you'll have burned several sprints to do it.
It's the sound guy problem. If you don't ever notice them,
nobody can tell.
Yep.
Hey, dude, I've lived as a system administrator. You can never get an A. You can get an F. But if you do your job perfectly, you get a C.
If they know your name, that's not good.
Wow, that audio doesn't suck.
Nobody says that.
Nobody
says that.
Yeah.
That's true.
But yeah, it is. Yeah, it's interesting, and I think we'll see how it continues to play out. But hopefully, Microsoft has a pretty good metered, steady approach. And
there's a pushback on here. Is this better? Is this better? Is this better? The community has grown up around solving a problem in a very reasonable way. Although you can see the cracks of trying to keep up with the cadence of the new features, and especially in Win 11. And now it's like, are they solving a problem or are they hijacking a problem? Like, I think depending on what seat you're sitting in, you can see it either way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a major challenge for open source in general. And I don't think that problem has been solved yet. And I don't think it's going to be solved here.
No. Well, there's a reason we keep talking about it on the show. Like I have been drinking with a great community maintainer who watched 2 FTEs show up on his project and just start pushing PRs like lightning. And it was not just that he was getting contributions, but these people were not in love with the product. This was their job. They were told by a PM, work on this. Here's the feature set we want. And it feels invasive.
Yeah, definitely.
Did the product get better? Yeah. If you agree with the direction they were going in, if you didn't, then what?
Fork it.
Yeah. And that's something I haven't seen yet, but I wonder about the day. I don't think Microsoft would ever do this. Politically, it's insane to say, the contributor the maintainer hasn't agreed with us. We think these are important features, so we're going to do a fork and here we go.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think, I think the fallout of that would be disastrous.
What the fork anyway?
Yeah. Yeah. We're just going to keep seeing people try different ways. But I do think one of the main things is communicating it ahead of time. Yeah. And I remember listening to a previous episode of .NET Rocks with a guest, maybe the maintainer of B Unit, was talking about kind of what do you want? What is the purpose of this open source? And I've kind of thought about this with some of my own projects, which is maybe we should have like a goals file, or maybe it should be part of our README, which is what's the purpose here? are you trying to, test a market and then turn this into a money-making endeavor? Are you trying to turn this into a job? Are you trying to turn this into a portfolio piece? Are you trying to hand this off as soon as possible? Is this a hot potato project? Or is this a long-lasting, long-lived, like, I want to build this, I want to maintain it, it can go on forever? And it's like, it would be kind of nice for people to identify the kind of project that they're doing. And maybe that's what licenses used to be.
And you bring up B Unit, and I literally was with Eagle last week. And I'm probably not speaking out of turn. He wanted this to exist. He was building Blazor stuff, and he needed a testing library. And so he shared it out. The idea that maybe a couple FDEs show up and add a whole bunch of features, like, in the end, he wanted a testing framework for Blazor.
Right.
Like, either way, that's a good outcome. But you're right. You end up looking into the souls of maintainers, and you're going to see a variety of things in there. What motivated you? Where are you trying to get to? What's important to you?
Yep. And what is the deal with this project? Now, if, to your point, if someone was to show up, what do you want them to have with them?
Yeah.
Like resources in the form of time, development resources, money, a check, consistent revenue. Like, are you trying to build a brand here? Are you trying to build a business here?
Yeah. Did you want to get hired by Microsoft to work on this full time?
Right. Sometimes that's the goal.
I think about Anthony and the names just jumped out of my head. Who are building the instrumentation on the client side. Glimpse. You're right. Good callback, dude.
Yeah.
And
Vanderhorn.
Get Glimpse was what it was called. And I don't think they intended that, but it's certainly what happened. And then they got pulled away from it too. Right? Like, hey, now you work for the machine. You don't get to work on what you want.
Right. Well, that's the interesting thing, is if you're looking to take a dependency and you see that this is basically a portfolio piece, well, you're not going to take that dependency. Because you're like, as soon as you get a job,
you're out.
You're out. You're gone. And this project is over.
Yeah, totally true.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I mean, WPF hasn't really had to fight this or like be in the middle of a project like this for a long time, because it was kind of dormant. But now that it's waking up, I think the space, it's
going to get interesting.
Yeah, the code space that we're in now, that WPF is waking up into, it's a little different than when it went to sleep.
Yeah. Welcome to the world.
So I think this conversation is going to keep getting more interesting. I don't think the interesting things are going to stop.
No,
I agree.
And again, if it was clear, we would say good or bad, but I don't know.
Yeah.
All I know is open source is different now, and we're seeing more manifestations of it.
Right.
So, Joe, what's in your inbox? What's next for you?
Building a Maui app. Building a new.
Cool. Don't do it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I know. Yeah. Learning how to build a Maui app. That's mainly
awesome.
it. Yeah.
Use that MVVM framework.
Oh, I will. I have. And the Maui App Accelerator.
Yeah, also good.
Very good.
In fact, I have James Montemagno on speed dial, so I highly recommend that, although you can't expect him to answer.
No.
He's a busy guy.
Just leave a lot of voicemail.
Yeah.
We miss you, James.
Well, Joe, thanks very much for spending this time with us, and it's great to hear that WPF is back. And keep us posted, will you?
I will.
All right. And we'll talk to you next time on .NET Rocks.
.NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time. Got a transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a